Hi, everybody. Welcome to the October Lunch and Learn, now called Connect and Learn, in deference to our friends across the country. Um, I'm here with Andrea Sullivan, who's teaching the Chi Nei Tsang um, um, Lunch and Learn or Connect and Learn today. Um, I'm Deborah Valentine Smith. I'm the current president of AOBTA. Our production team includes Wayne Milan, our managing director, Matthew Swigert, our communications director, and Brian Scow, our communications consultant. So many of our presenters are participating in the AOBTA convention next April and May. Andrea is going to be doing some Qigong with us. And we're going to be getting the registration out this month. So we're doing it spread over 2 weekends so that there's only one workshop presented at a time. So you can take everything if you are up to it, but you can also take things by recording. Everything will be recorded, but you will have access to all of the workshops. So stay tuned. Some housekeeping tips. In this webinar, you're in listen only mode. So we can't see you or hear you, but Matthew is going to be monitoring the chat and the Q&A function, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. And when Andrea's finished with her presentation, he'll be feeding those questions and answer questions to Andrea. The webinar is recorded. So if you don't want to be on the recording, just turn your video camera off. And it will be made available to you at the end of the workshop. There will be people who will be coming on who couldn't make it in person and who will be looking at the recording as well. It'll be posted on the website and it'll be made available to you through email. At the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you're going to see either gallery view or speaker view. If it shows speaker view, click on that. Because you want to be in speaker view so that you're seeing the full screen. And I think that's it. There will be a poll at the end, so please stay tuned and answer the poll for us. I want to introduce Andrea. Andrea Sullivan is an AOBTA certified instructor in Japanese Shiatsu Anma and Chi Nei Tsang, and she's also the vice president of the AOBTA board. She's also a Universal Tao instructor and a Chi Nei Tsang practitioner. She received her education under the direct supervision of Taoist master Mantak Chia. She also teaches Tui Na, Daoyin yoga, Tai Chi, and meditation, and is an instructor at Centerpoint, the AOBTA Council of Schools and Programs School in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So welcome, Andrea. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Absolutely. One addition to the introduction is I have experienced a few different teachers, Mantak Chia being one of them, but Serena Stone was an influential teacher, and so was Mary Ellen Durwas of the Berkeley Institute, and she and Gilles Marin were influential teachers as well. So there's a lot of amazing Chi Nei Tsang teachers. So let's begin. This Chi Nei Tsang focus is on the navel center since it is the microcosm of the universe. And it supports the 8 directions as well as the 8 trigrams or the natural forces of nature, and then their organs. So Damo, which translates as the mother of the Big Dipper, is the origin of everybody's prenatal chi. And the navel throughout life is considered to be continually fed by that motherly primordial essence through the umbilical cord of the navel. Next. And that postnatal chi is fed by the prenatal chi from the universe. And it's said to be fed by the elements and the changes in seasons, as well as different constellations, planets, and stars. and it all is said to influence the health of a body and the organs. Next. So Chi Nei Tsang originated in Beijing mid-18th century, and it was offered by the White Cloud monks in temples. Usually that's where the healing centers were. And during the Cultural Revolution, they were fortunate enough to be dormant and untouched by some of the government's use of power. They would destroy a lot of the temples and a lot of the literature. And Chi Nei Tsang was taught to Montauk Chia by Dr. Mui Yinwatang. You're welcome to change the slide. And when Montauk Chia met him, he was very ill. He was said to have to be carried into his office. And after three hours with Dr. Mui Yinwatana, he was able to revive him just through abdominal work. So after his experience, he decided to become a student. And when Chi Nei Tsang practitioners address their clients, they call them students. So it's almost that everyone who does this form of learning through healing becomes a student of themselves. So next. The techniques of Chi Nei Tsang are helpful to manually clear the blockages, untie the knots. And I would say that could be intestinal knots as much as it might be fascial knots. It expels wind and frees emotions from the body. So the techniques include kneading, spiraling, shaking, and rocking, as well as scooping and pumping and patting the abdomen to build chi, and also elbow pressure. Elbows are used to help expel wind from the wind gates. And applied Qigong is used during a session to help guide the focus of the student who is receiving abdominal work, and also to help infuse their body. They're doing active healing techniques with sound and color and drawing in the elements. Change the slide. And in more detail, the colors and elements are synonymous together, but also some of the stars and planets that I referred to would be a source of bringing in a certain quality of chi and a certain light into that organ system. Another practice that was used a lot was the 6 healing sounds, and it's detoxification of emotional debris through vibration. And you would use that to help purge stagnation from different organs. Next slide. So emotions are said to be the origin of a physical imbalance, and it's described as a wind. So our mind gets stirred up and a wind starts to produce an effect of either cold or hot on the organ. And the collection points are similar to maybe the wind gates that you've encountered through acupressure or learning the points. And beyond that, there's another set of collection points, almost like mu points, that are different than mu points, but they show these sites of collection for wind. The most common would be the navel. So you have a picture of somebody pressing open the 8 wind gates around the navel, each one related to a trigram, a natural force, and a direction, as well as an organ. Next slide. And the positive emotional cycle generates chi. And you have the healing sounds on this slide, so you can see them, and the virtues that are associated with the health of the organ. So as you release emotion, positive or negative, without a story, there's a sense of kind of a cleaning or purifying of the emotion itself. When a person is able to do these practices, it's said to actually reduce your body's temperature, core temperature, by a few degrees. And that generates like a preservation of the organs, like through refrigeration. Next slide. So the negative emotions create a fight or flight response or an acidic response in the nervous system, and it starts to erode the organs, creates inflammation, and it starts to create an environment where the rhythm of the organ gets impeded with either heat or cold. So, for instance, when the liver itself holds on to too much anger, frustration, or jealousy, there's a sense in a production of cholesterol, a imbalance in digestion, and blood stagnation because the liver has less ability to filter its own blood. And this stagnation in any organ is said to create like a stirring up of the mind and an imbalance in our thoughts as much as our physical body. So next slide. So Chi Nei Tsang, as we'll learn about more very soon, is, I would say, like 3 different original threads coming into a 2,500-year-old new system, where it includes Japanese, Thai, and Chinese influence. They use the tongue and pulse, like Chinese medicine, abdominal palpation, like the 5 phase points that you would find on the belly, and Chinese face assessment as ways to understand what's happening in the organ system. The reflex points in this slide that I mentioned are similar to the MASUNAGA chart for the abdominal points. And the specialty of Chi Nei Tsang is its navel assessment. So you observe the shape and symmetry of the navel, and the navel is 3-dimensional. Well, it depends on if you have an innie or an outie, but that says something too, where you have the rim of the navel itself, you have kind of the depth of how deep it is and what that looks like. Sometimes when wind is involved, that'll look spiraled. And then you have the base of the navel, and you can see kind of the depth of how much torque and twist and change the navel's gone through because of excess or deficiencies in the organs. So the navel rim pulls itself out of shape and kind of points towards the organ with deficiency, and it'll have kind of a puffiness or a pulled in towards the center from an excess condition. It is not uncommon to see an excess and a deficiency in somebody's navel at the same time. Since a deficiency will create an excess in another part of the body, you'll see how these organ systems are working together just by how they're pulling and pushing the fascia. So the fascia has a blanket-like quality. It's interstitial between the organs and it's through the musculature. And if, say, the liver becomes inflamed or full, that swelling will start to pull, grab, and even twist if there's wind at the navel center and towards the right. So it'll point towards the Well, it'll point towards the organ that it's most needing to be to be worked on. So your organ system might pull towards it or push away from it. And there's ways in kind of gathering the tissue towards the center that you would reassess which organ is most likely to be worked on at that moment for your client. Because you may see fullness in the liver, deficiency in the spleen, but due to how you pull the tissue back to the center of the navel to see how it corrects itself. So I would like draw the skin towards the navel from the spleen, and draw the skin towards the navel from the liver, and see which one created the most symmetry. And whichever organ wins is the one organ that's going to have the easiest time receiving healing or body work that day. Next slide. So this is a more detailed picture of the 8 forces and the organ systems that relate to them. Each one of the trigrams is, it's a very powerful, energetic understanding of the universe. And if you understand the trigrams in relation to the organs, then you get another depth or level of information about that person's constitution. And it could be psychological as much as physical. So next slide. So this is a picture directly from the Chi Nei Tsang book, and it relates to all the organs, but it can also point towards or away from the organ that needs the most support. So it's hard to do it on your own navel unless you're looking in a mirror or you have a hand mirror. But you'll notice throughout like a cycle of a day, how many times your navel changes, or a cycle of a month, how many times your navel will change. So in that way, it's very similar to like the tongue, where it gives a full body image of the health of each organ. And yeah, next slide. This is one of my favorite handouts about the navel. It shows the dual direction quality in how you assess the navel. And it also includes information about the structure of the hips and some of the emotional responses that'll happen as a result of some of the changes in the navel. So for instance, when you have a pull up towards the heart on the navel center, there is likely to be a puffy fullness below. As a result, maybe the kidneys are over flooded with water where the heart is deficient because of excess water pooling underneath itself. I would like to give you enough time to read this, but some of the other slides with information are in kind of a picture form that you can receive. So it can be structural pulls on the navel as much as organ pulls, but even the structural changes in the torso itself stem mostly from the organs and their swelling or flaccidness. So next slide. And Chi Nei Tsang uses the MASUNAGA reflex point chart. And the origin of that chart comes from I actually wrote it backwards. It's the Asai Masano's Muban School abdominal chart. And the Muban School was a Japanese art called Dashin, and Isai Masano was considered to be a Dashin master. What they did was kind of a needle or post. They had kind of this rod that was for acupressure, but it was cylindrical and bigger than an acupuncture needle because it wasn't going to be inserted. It would use the needles or those pegs and actually tap open the wind gates or the organs themselves due to that reflex chart. And they'd use silver or gold needles to be able to tonify or disperse. So silver would disperse and gold would tonify. They called this form of diagnosis and treatment the Hokushinkai style. And it's still being practiced in Japan, but from what I gathered, there was only one school that was really doing this form of work with reflex points and hammers and needles. So this is where Masunaga received the first template of his chart that he eventually made in like 1925. And I find it to be amazing in how similar it is, but also its differences. I recently read an article about acupuncture points, and they were trying to relay how some of the original texts were more pure or more completely preserved in Japan. And so their Kempo styles of acupuncture may have some point location differences that are more true. Something that I haven't explored further. I've received Japanese acupuncture, and I have to say it was very impactful. I don't always experience something every acupuncture treatment, but it was hand Japanese acupuncture and abdomen acupuncture, and that was really powerful. So this is the Muban's school abdominal chart. You can change to the next slide. And this is Masunaga's chart. Since the Muban school has a deeper origin, you should look at them side by side. Those are two of the handouts that you'll receive, and it's fascinating to see their supportive similarities. So this point chart is used for assessment and treatment, and you can feel the fullness in those points and the emptiness, as well as pain or loss of sensation. And Chi Nei Tsang uses this chart and also another system inside its own system called Taksen. And it's very similar to the Muban school. So the Taksen is a 2,500-year-old therapy. Tak means sound, sacred sound, and Sen means the Sen line. So it has a Thai origin. And that originated from India. And it was brought by a gentleman named, in Thai they call him Dr. Shivago, but his Indian name, so he was an Ayurvedic doctor, is Dr. Jiva Kakumara Bhattacharya. That's a huge name. But the origins of this medicine come from it would be the Bun Buddhists, which are some of the oldest Buddhist sects that were found in India around that same time. And that form of Buddhism migrated to Thailand, and all of its healing arts, including the Taksen mallet. They use wooden mallets with a wooden hammer, similar with reflex points and kind of these wind gates being opened, as well as the joints and the tendon attachments. So this doctor, who was a yogi and a physician, brought these healing Taksen methods with the mallet, similar to the Muban school. And because of the Cultural Revolution, a lot of those original manuscripts in Asia were lost, except for Thailand. So then after the Second World War, that's when this form of massage turned into Thai massage. So because Chi Nei Tsang uses Taksen, and because Dr. Mui Yin Watana was half Chinese and half Thai, and Masunaga's chart originates from Japanese Muban school, there's all of these interesting connective threads to what created the foundation for Chi Nei Tsang itself. And that is my presentation. Feel free to go to the next chart. So the goal with Chi Nei Tsang is to manually pump, squeeze, and move all of the toxins out of the organs, freeing stagnation and blockages from impeding the healthy flow, and being able to restore the health of the structure of the body through the health of the 5 organs, or the 12 organs. And when all of that returns to health, you have a harmonious relationship with the universe and contemplating your navel. So thank you. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if there are some.
Yes, that's great. We have a good bit of time here too as well. Thank you. And so I'm sure there will be lots of questions, I would guess, because it's chock full of information. So we have one here from, I'm going to start my video here. Okay, so you guys can see me as well. Hello. One from Yolanda Osher. She asks, what is applied medical Qigong and how is it different from clinical medical Qigong in the that we use as an ABT form?
There's like self-cultivation Qigong, and then there's, I would say, medical Qigong that you do through your own methods, and then applied medical Qigong is the client is laying on the table, for instance, and I'm doing maybe a pumping technique to detox the liver. I would ask them to use the healing sound of the liver and start to draw in green light into their liver, as well as inhale, gather any of the turbid, stagnant anger or frustration, and then exhale and use the healing sound to draw more of this green light into the body. Meanwhile, I am also pumping the physical organ itself, but doing the same practice. So drawing in my own green light to be of service to their liver, but also gathering and purging my own liver with similar healing sounds, even if they're subvocal. And there's another level of Chi Nei Tsang where they said they would draw in maybe stars or influences from the universe. There would be a stronger practice that the practitioner would be doing while they're giving these suggestions to the client to apply their Qigong at that time. So that's maybe the difference. I haven't found another circumstance that I've encountered that does that.
So this is then applied medical Qigong is doing this clinical while you're doing the Chi Nei Tsang, while you're doing the pumping action, while you're doing the physical, you're recruiting the client to do it as well, and you also do it at the same time. And so that's your description of applied medical Qigong.
Right.
Yolanda, I hope that helps you. And if you have a follow-up question for Andrea, please type it in. Meanwhile, we'll move on to Melissa Cathcart. She's asking, do you have a resource for learning more about the BAGUA in terms of the abdomen?
Well, the Chi Nei Tsang from the teachers that I've learned so far reference that each one of these forces is a BAGUA, but the practices that include a BAGUA in the navel center are fusion practices, fusion of the 5 elements. So it's another technique where you would apply this visualization while you're receiving work or as a self practice. So the Bagua actually, this is the Qigong quality of the Bagua maybe in its use, but you'd see it spinning and become like this energy turbine for the navel center. Then you would draw out all of the impurities of the organs, leaving the organs clear, but bringing the colors, the elements, and the emotions into this spiraling Bagua. And what it would do is it would break it apart, turn it into kind of a compost mulch, and then other alchemy practices or visualizations would go into transforming it into useful chi that you then nourish your body with. So that's one use of the Bagua in, I would say, the medical Qigong aspect. And then when you think of, say, the forces of Dui, which is the trigram for the rainy lake, that relates to the large intestine in the Bagua system, and it points to the large intestine's sigmoid colon in the 8 directions on the navel. So the archetype of Dui is considered to be the hidden, mysterious, unseen, and also like secret parts of this mysterious rainy lake. You can see the mist rising from the lake. You can't see underneath. You don't know what's under there. And that is considered to be the symbology or the spirit of the large intestine in its trigram depiction. And I would say, if I were to give somebody homework, I found out that the wind gate of Dui was the most stagnant and difficult to open. Then there's a hand gesture that can recreate the trigram that I would give to them as homework for their own meditation practice to just unlock that potential, whatever those 8 potentials of nature are inside of us.
So I would suggest here, in answer to Melissa's question as well, that you are a resource for learning more about the Bagua in terms of the abdomen.
I'm still learning about the Bagua. I love.
Where are the resources? You are obviously a resource for our membership and for the community. And what resources do you rely on for getting this kind of education around use in the Bagua?
The most recent learning of the 8 trigrams in the Bagua has been from Master Zhangshang Wu, and I've studied with him for just, I would say, 2 years now, but all of his books are amazing. Everything that he kind of understands about the trigrams has an incredible depth of spirit, and his understanding of the Qigong in relation to the Bagua gives me more to go with the Chi Nei Tsang and its relation to the Bagua.
Right. So, beautiful. So let's make sure we get his name spelling as a resource for people as well.
Yeah.
Perfect. Kara Esberg is asking if you can show different palpation techniques. How deep, hand movement styles, does it work in moving slow, fast, deep, light, direction? I don't know how much you can actually demonstrate for us because you don't have a belly in front of you except.
Well, this video might get weird. You're going to see my belly or something, but I can explain. I'll explain the different techniques and how they would actually be used. But the kneading techniques are, I would say, similar to the Roto no Jitsu that you might have learned for the HARA in other systems. And that's just a way of kind of breaking up and warming the tissue. And the spiraling techniques, the kneading techniques of that kneading, the, what do they call it? The canoeing that you do on the belly. You can do that in different depths. So at the superficial level, you're touching the small intestine. And as you get deeper on the sides, you'll be touching the large intestine. But then as you go deeper to the right, it's the liver, and then the spleen and stomach to the left. And you would assess through kneading as a way to understand what strengths or weaknesses are in the belly. The spiraling technique is usually for clearing blockages, and specifically small intestine blockages. Where the small intestine lives is in the first 1.5 inches of the tissue. So if you press beyond that, you would actually cut off a portion of the small intestine itself and stop the movement. Whereas this spiraling technique tries to push and break up the stagnation in the small intestine in every direction that it would go. So superficial to middle pressure during small intestine work gives you more movement. Whereas the large intestine is even closer to the back of the body. So the deeper pressure would be used to help open up the large intestine, since that's where it lives. So I found a lot of help in seeing 3D anatomy images of the torso, really understanding where my pressure is being most influenced. And for instance, the shaking is to help the lymphatic system throughout the abdomen. You would shake different organs to move the water. And the rocking is to help to move chi stagnations. Padding would be like an added chi packing, where you're delivering extra chi back to that portion of the body and stimulating the yang chi to rise to the skin surface. The scooping techniques that they have are to drain, I would say, interstitial water. It's most commonly used to help draw down the stomach out of the diaphragm if it's herniated, and also to purge or milk the spleen, since it's a really large lymph node. So those are the scooping techniques, are usually to like gather and purge water. And pumping is mostly used for purging, detoxing, and releasing from the liver. And it's a large sponge, so you're kind of like squishing it from the back and front to open up and force the metabolism of the toxins and fats through that part of the tissue. And then the elbow pressure is my favorite, very interesting, where you let your body relax and you twist the tendons in your arm to become like a hollow vacuum. The goal being to touch each one of the 8 wind gates, sink your elbow in, and then let this spiraling chi move the wind out. And I kid you not, there's like this way in which you press the navel, you'll feel the hardness of the wind come to the surface. And then you're supposed to linger in that area. Let them breathe into your pressure. It doesn't have to be hard, it just needs to be like connected. And at some point there's this like pop open, the door releases, and then all of a sudden your thumb sinks in a very unique way. And that's the releasing of these 8 wind gates.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That reminded me of a question about the 8 wind gates related to the order in which I noticed that like one to the right, 2 up, 3 to the left, 4 to the bottom, and then 5, 6, 7, and 8 as the cross quarters.
Yeah.
Are they actually done in that order? Do you actually move through the 8 wind gates in that order? To the right, to above, to the left, to below, and then get the cross quarters in?
Yes, it doesn't make it less effective if you do them in just a circle.
Okay.
Actually, I've tried them both ways. The reason that they do it that way, in the same way that the Pope goes down, across, and over. When you're making a talisman of the 8 BAGUA, you would go up, down, left, right, and then you'd make this X. And so it has actually a really old magical reason for its numbering.
Got it. Thank you. Deborah Smith is asking, can you say more about the planetary correspondences?
Oh, sure. So each organ relates to a planet, and I would say that the influences that the planet has on the organ is a lot about the character nature that comes out of a person at different times. So in the same way that when the moon is full and the tide goes out, there's this incredible tug on the primary forces in nature. And in a similar way, for instance, the liver relates to Jupiter. You would notice either like an increase in the natural inflammation of the liver, just an extra growth because of this influence of Jupiter. And it might look like extra anger, or that expansion might be the creative, expansive, visionary quality of the liver becomes accelerated during a Jupiter time. So that's its external relationship to the organ itself, where our emotions seem to have this gravity, where our tides pull in and out depending on the strengths or weakness of the planet's influence. And in a practical way, the way that it would be used in a Chi Nei Tsang practice, and I don't know many people that do this, but the planets themselves are a source of greater energy than yourself. So if you can connect with your liver and the color green and the forces of wood that connect to the forces of Jupiter and all of those expansive qualities, you draw that energy in. This is what the practitioner would do while the client's just breathing green light in and out of their liver. Practitioner would be drawing in the quality or strength of Jupiter to be able to overcome their weakness or fullness in the liver.
So you're drawing on the planetary strength and power as an influential, energetic resource.
Right, and the 7 primary colors come from the 7 stars of the Big Dipper and the North Star. So
right,
a practitioner would use those associations to bring that kind of energy that's greater than themselves into the client for transformation.
Right. And actually the North Star is one of the stars of the Big Dipper. Totally cool. And there are 7 colors. Do you want to run through those 7 primary colors for everybody?
Oh, yeah. Let's see how good my skills are. Okay. So red, yellow, orange, green, blue, purple. That's it. Those are the ones. And purple is the North Star. And red, oh, I want to say it's, I forget which one. But there's a book called Cosmic Healing, and it's through Montauk Chia's publishing company, but that very much illuminates the details on this universal connection to the physical body. They even go into greater detail if you're like a cranial sacral person. They have the different planets in relation to the bones of the cranium, and all of it gets very interesting. So.
Okay, very good. I only counted 6 colors there.
Oh, did I flunked. What was that? Okay.
That's all right. Red, yellow, orange, green, blue, and purple. And there's one more. Cool. Thanks. Another question came in from Antonio Gonzalez. He's asking, what is the relation between Chi Nei Tsang and Doumu. He
And-
spells it D-O-U-M-U.
Is he referring to Damo? There's different translations of the Chinese into English, and I could see that being another way of describing it. So Anma has a reference to being like the mother's touch. And in this case, the Damo reference relates to the mother of the Big Dipper. So I would say the origin of energy is said to come from this Big Dipper planetary influence that's called the Great Mother.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder, I would love more clarification from Antonio if he's willing, if that wasn't the
All right. Well, let's see. I guess his question seems to be, what is the relation between Chi Nei Tsang and the Daomu? So I guess, and he says exactly. Okay, his reply to your reply was exactly. So I guess the question about what is then the relationship is Chi Nei Tsang, has it been influenced by the Daomu? Which came first, or how did they interact with one another?
Oh, essentially, in the theory, nothing came before Damo. Essentially, the mother created all the things. But
Yeah.
In Taoism, Damo is considered to be an important fixture of kind of the source of all primordial chi in the world. And so, since Chi Nei Tsang translates as internal organ kind of chi massage, or chi internal massage, the force that they're working with is this primordial energy. So this last October, I did have a chance to go to China, and we walked up Damo's mountain to the Taishan mountain. And so she has all of these little temples along the way that you can stop and give her offerings. And just as a fixture, I would say in Asia, in its ancient times, it was similar to like the mother goddess figure or Mother Mary. And it was more predominant than any of the later archetypes. She was considered to be almost the origin of where the trigrams came from. And then after the trigrams, you have the 8 immortals, and they came second. So it's more of a theory that goes along with all Taoist practices, and this includes that.
Very cool. All right. Any other questions here? There is a comment from Deb Smith suggesting that the original translation of the I Ching by Wilhelm goes into the qualities of the classical associations of the Bagua. Are you familiar with that translation?
I've read it. It's really good. There's also an audio version of it, which is insightful. I find it to be easy to do life and listen to little I Ching discussions. There is a book called The Shamanic Tiger Shamanic Cosmic Orbit Qigong, which is by my teacher, Master Wu, and he has a practice of the 8 kind of mudra hand gestures that go with movements for energizing the 8 trigrams of the body. And it's all done seated. So I really highly recommend that. And again, I've been considering it as a possible meditation suggestion to the clients that need certain forces to be strengthened in their body.
Okay.
And there's an I Ching workbook too that I've really loved. It's a very old book, but it's, I'm going to write his name in the chat.
So that the meditation you spoke of with energizing the 8 trigrams is from Master Wu?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm writing his name in the chat right now.
Okay. Yeah. Master Zhang Xian Wu. Okay. That's in the chat. Everybody should have access to that. And we'll make sure that it's in the resources for the recording. Excuse me. Yeah, the AOBTA website has the entire collection of Connect and Learn available to our members. So just know that we always have access to these recordings and we can come back later, especially when we have a program with a lot of density and a lot of detail. You'll want to go back over this. Shamanic Cosmic Orbit, is that the name of the meditation?
That's the Qigong that has a book and a DVD, but anyone can do these, which I find really wonderful.
Right.
They're all seated.
Yeah. All seated. Great. An anonymous attendee is asking if you have any advice or counsel for someone who has had surgery in the navel, where there's a little scar inside the navel.
Mm-hmm.
Any healing thoughts for how one might approach a post-surgical scarring around the navel, in the navel region?
The Chi Nei Tsang technique that you'd be asked to do on yourself, so you could do this, is called skin rolling. Oh, now you get to see my belly. It's happening. Okay. So for skin rolling, you pick up the tissue and you kind of pinch it. Your goal is to break up the adhesions. In a perfect situation, you'd be going crosswise along and over where the scar is. So you're really rolling the skin and tracking where the fascia is being bound. And you'll notice that the scar will start to turn kind of a pinkish color. Some of the crunchiness that is the scar tissue will start to break apart over time. It's about the diligence of doing it daily to bring more blood to re-nourish the tissue that'll kind of break it down. And if you add something like a frankincense and a myrrh oil to this skin rolling technique, myrrh helps to break up scar tissue. Frankincense will help to repair the tissue. So you're breaking it apart, trying to break up the density of scars. And then the frankincense is able to repair and reknit the tissue with less adhesion. Mm-hmm. So it might take maybe like three to 6 months, but in what it can do, I've seen really old, I would say hysterectomy, or not hysterectomy, where they take the baby out.
Oh yeah.
I clearly haven't had one.
Cesarean, C-section.
When they have the cesarean, some of the older versions of that are like a really big smiley face scar. And I've seen women be able to like regain so much tissue and soften their belly just through this skin rolling technique.
Yeah. Yeah, this question led me to a further question, which came up earlier, was working with a pregnant woman or a woman who has had babies before. You know, how does pregnancy change the navel, and how do you take that into account?
Pregnancy kind of disrupts the ability to see the navel well. Usually they'll stretch it out to the point of losing the shape completely, or they get an outie even though they had an innie. So it's not as useful for an assessment at that point, though you could still see some variations on how it's pulled to one side or the other. So that would show you maybe where the baby is, but it might not show as much of what organ systems are being influenced for her specifically. What you can do with Chi Nei Tsang in a gentle way is to help any of the stagnation in the intestines that starts to occur from the baby smushing into the organs and pushing everything upward. You can get inside there and help to move along any kind of debris or constipation. And I've had one moment with success of helping to spiral or turn a semi-breached baby into place. And so the gentleness of just doing soothing was all that I needed to do, but it was with intent, with the client's intent, and with a little understanding of where the anatomy of the baby was. So those things can happen with pregnancy.
And then post-pregnancy, like a woman who's had several children, perhaps, what might be demonstrated through this Chi Nei Tsang with the navel work?
It very much can help the kind of reconstruction of putting the organs back into place. There's a long process of the body reconnecting to itself. You can also do bladder and uterus lifting. There's actually a technique where you gather the tissue of the uterus and the bladder and you help put it back into place. And so the use of that is excellent, and it's all can be done over the clothes, so it's not even an invasive technique in that way. But those are some of the greatest ways that the Chi Nei Tsang works with some of the deeper structure of the torso and puts the organs where they need to be after a big shift.
Great. There is a follow-up question from anonymous attendee about the scar work. Wondering if the direction is important, meaning do you go from left to right or from right to left, or does that matter?
You want to be cross fiber to the scar. So if the scar is up and down or along the navel, you're gonna do your work across it. So you're rolling across it to try and break it up because the wood grain is this way. So you want to go against the wood grain. If you had a scar like this, then you would go up and against it.
And it wouldn't matter whether you come from the left and move to the right or from the right and move to the left?
Yeah,
Or from the bottom to the top or the top to the bottom?
Skin rolling as a technique is supposed to go from one side to the other. Skin rolling as a tool is when you go cross fiber along whatever the scar tissue is and you keep going along it, and there's not as much form, but you know when you're getting through the tissue. So you just keep working in that area as much as you can handle it. And that's the tool of it.
And back and forth, up and down, right and left.
Right.
Yeah.
You want to break it apart.
Just keep working it and follow it intuitively as far as direction of work.
We're going to need to wrap up, Matthew. We've got about 2 minutes.
Oh, thank you. I forgot to look at my clock has disappeared.
This is really wonderful, Andrea. I think we'll look forward to you doing a fuller workshop at some point.
Sure. Well, it'd be fun to show you on real bellies in the future, and we can all play together.
Yeah. So I wanted to mention also that Andrea did our seasonal Qigong video for the fall equinox, which is available on the website. You can go there. It's a lovely Qigong practice that you can go back and repeat over and over. The next Connect and Learn is November 18th with Karen Broyles on techniques from orthobionomy and how to use them in our practice. Just want to remind you that a survey is going to pop up when the session ends. Please just take a couple minutes and answer those questions. And thanks everybody for being here, and thanks so much. This was really lovely. So,
thank you, Deborah.
right.
Thank you, Matthew, Wayne, and Brian for helping.
Beautiful. Have a beautiful day, everyone.
Take care.